My name is Dr. Matthew Itodo. I'm an independent researcher at the University of Lagos.
My name is Ekemeka Roslyn, a student of philosophy at the University of Lagos.
My name is Noah Soli Damara, the President of National Association of Philosophy Students, University of Lagos.
My name is Taiwo Olade Dubura. I'm a student of philosophy department, University of Lagos.
Yeah, my name is Dr. Pascal Chinomia Meke. I'm the lead researcher and the founder of this African Center for Poetics Training and Research. We want to bring our African perspective to have its own space in the global poetics thinking. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to talk briefly on the topic religion and the Africanization of the African mind. Dr. Pascal, I know you're not a Pan-Africanist, so I'm going to excuse you. It should rather be a religion and the re-Africanization of the African mind. I just saw it this morning. That's why I should re-Africanization of the African mind. So I'm going to excuse you. But what we're trying to do is what Professor Ogunole refers to as self-retrieval, retrieval of the self. We're trying to retrieve the true African mind from what we now have. What we now have is a distorted um, African identity. So as Pan-Africanists, we're trying to retrieve it, self-retrieval. What Professor Una and Professor Okoro refers to as the construction of the African metaphysics. What Professor Kechuku Kambu refers to as what do you call it? African Renaissance. Even Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe also calls it the African Renaissance. And a lot of scholars have called it several names: the cultural reappropriation, and so on and so forth. Um, if we're going to retrieve the African mind, the first thing we need to do, or you might one of it, it's interesting. Is it what do we mean by re-Africanization of the African mind? Is it that the African mind has been distorted? Is it that what we now have or call the African mind is something else aside the original African mind? Yes, that's the fact. What we now have is distorted. What we now have is not the real identity. Just like Professor Mumba often said, that Africa is the only place where when you speak your language, your native language, you'll be seen as not intelligent. You must speak English or what do you call it? This Islamic religion and their Arabic, thank you. For you to be intelligent, for you to be spiritually high, for you to qualify to relate with God. What does that mean? So if I don't speak English as part of my religious upbringing, if I don't speak Arab as part of my religious upbringing, it means I will never have the opportunity to see God or go to heaven. So that's the fate of the African man, and that's why we're talking about to retrieve or radicalize the African mind, so as we can retrieve the original true African mind. That is the only way we can foster true development. If you follow events recently, in the past year or two, um, the most talked about president in Africa now is this young man in Burkina Faso. Sorry, you need to observe what the man is doing there. The first thing is he is trying to retrieve the original African mind. He first of all had to do away with his colonial masters, which is the French of France. And France, they're not happy about that. The next thing is he's trying to develop the agrarian society. There's something I wanted to chip in earlier about when Dr. Pascal talked about robotics and population issues. See, I am among those that believe that there's a conspiracy by the globalists, people called some set of rich individuals and countries called the globalists, including, what's his name? Bill Gates, to an extent, Zuckerberg, yeah, to an extent, and others, Oprah Winfrey. You see, the thing is, they are trying to foster a world where we're going to be totally dependent on AI, robotics, and so on, in order to neglect some aspect of our true culture. Now, look at in Africa, we focus more on agrarian culture. We have an agrarian culture. So when you push this agenda of high-tech world, it means you have to be less reliant on agriculture, and that's why they are pushing us, forcing GMO on us. Because when you have GMOs, you don't need a massive plantation to run GMOs because of its scientific and technological source. It's not as natural. GMO foods are not as natural as what we eat from our mothers, our indigenous farms. So what they're trying to do is just, okay, how do you meet up with the high-tech world where you have less hands? And less hands means it means less reliance on natural foods. So in order to cover up, you have to bring in GMOs. I don't believe in that. I don't take that. And that's why we need to stop relying on the West, because they are fostering some dangerous policies on us. And it's that time to retrieve the true African mind. That's why we need to radicalize our mind to retrieve our true African mind. Now, where do we start? Where do we start from? Now, the African mind, the beginning of the attempt to steal the true African mind started with one, the slave trade. We also have imposition of foreign cultures, then foreign religions. Of course, that we must stop. You cannot avoid that. Then there's the issue of corruption and what we now call globalization, which is a twisted form of which is twisted because it doesn't favor Africans. That's where that's the beginning of the how do you call it, of the radicalization of the African mind. Now the West, through colonialism, through slave trade, through imposition of its own culture, succeeded in twisting the true African mind to sway towards its own aspect, its own area, culture. And let me bring it to let me tell you something about myself and some other Pan-Africanists. I used to tell people that look, I can put on jeans and shirts, but there's something I will never do without my bangle, my bead, and my African neck chain. That means while I'm dancing to the tune of the West, I still have my root, my African root, which is my bangle, my African bangle, and my what do you call it, one or two accessories, which connects me with my African root. That for me is one way to connect with the African mind. Now, there's also I also tell my friends also that I like what Burna Boy and what's his name, um, Whiskey and the other guys, other Davido are doing because they're selling African Afrobeat to the world. A lot of people are appreciating their music. A lot of people don't know that behind it, behind that music is a way of self-retrieval. It's a way of selling Africa to the world. Rather than dancing to American hip hop or American pop, we are dancing to our own African music. And that's what Davido, Burna Boy, and Whiskey are portraying to the world. And I am in support of it. Seriously. I'm a big fan of those three guys, especially. I know there are other guys too, Rema and Co. And name them. You see, so if we're going to retrieve the African mind, and since some of us don't want to adopt the African religion, which um, radical men like Fela and Co have done, I believe we should use music to retrieve the African mind. And thanks to Davido, Burna Boy, but that's the best way to catch the youth. Music, pop, African pop music or African Afrobeat music. You get what I'm saying? So music is an instrument where we can retrieve the African mind because it helps us to still connect with what is African, the true African. And who started the Afrobeat syndrome? Fela Nicola Kuti. although he is true to the game because he is also spiritually connected to the African mind, to the African spiritualism. Now, since we are living in a world where the youths are the majority, where we have what we call Gen Zs, and if you're going to be relevant in the current world, then if you want to be trending, then you must be connected to a thing or two which the African youth or the young ones appreciate. I'm in support of those, or I'm in support of Afrobeat because I see Afrobeat and its message as one of the ways to retrieve the true African mind. So, in conclusion, I'm going to say that the best way to get the African mind is to be authentic. And how are we going to be authentic? By adopting some homegrown um, methods of doing things. Now, if you ask a typical young African that, what do you know about your village? Do you know about your traditions? The answer will be no. Because our parents did not take time or take the time to teach us some things about our culture. And so what we have is our culture, our indigenous cultures are becoming extinct. It's a sad situation, very, very sad situation for the Africans. And so I am among those who says that, who believes that First Tax 77, which happened about 40 some almost 50 years ago, should be organized once again. Now, for those of us who were too young to appreciate what First Tax 77 meant, it was a gathering of all the African countries in Nigeria where African cultures and traditions were on display. It took place in the first quarter of, I think, of the year 1977. But do you know what? Do you know how some so-called born again or Christian pastors, you know what they said? They said, "Oh, Obasanjo brought African culture to Nigeria to pollute the Nigerian political system, and that's the source of our calamity." I don't agree with that. Now, if we had followed seriously with that First Tax 77, if we had probably held three more events connected to Africa to First Tax 77, it would have endeared more to our African indigenous systems. Unfortunately, we did not. And that gave rise to the Western culture further polluting what we now call Africa. So, in sum, I am going to keep encouraging the young ones to listen to Burna Boy, Whiskey, Davido, and others who are propagating Afrobeats because I feel it is the easiest way to capture the African mind through what we call Afrobeat music because of the power of music in our modern times. Thank you.
Okay, to build more on your point, and I also have various questions, and there are things that you said that I do not 100% agree with. First of all, the topic, religion and the Africanization of the African man. Why do we have to start bringing back Africanness, our African mind? Why do we have to like deconstruct to reconstruct? What led to that ideology? I believe it was our experiences that shaped that idea, that concept. Experiences such as racism, colonialism, slavery, imperialism, and still neocolonialism. Because I feel like we're still suffering from
Yeah, that's
neocolonialism.
what.
Now, this let me say this attributed to they stole our identity. How?
Yes.
They brought in their concepts, their policy, their belief.
Mm.
Where we have the policy of assimilation and association, whereby the French said that we have to do away with our own culture, our own
Yes.
belief, and adapt their own culture.
Yes.
Thereby, look at the whole thing. We throw away our own religion, our own culture, and we accept the culture of a foreigner.
Yes.
But we are still not accepted by that foreigner because of what? Color. So at that point, Africans, we lost our identity.
Thank you.
Now, we've been suffering from this identity identity
Crisis.
crisis and all of that. It was now the some African thinkers that said, enough is enough. Let us bring back our Africanness.
Beautiful.
Then we started having movement like
Pan-Africanism.
Pan-Africanism,
Yeah.
led with under
Negative.
philosophers like thinkers like Julius Nyerere.
Yes.
He said that movement was the movement of the black race. We are wearing back our Africanness. We are bringing back our identity because you told us if we do away with our identity and accept yours, will be good. But you still did not accept us because of our color. Now, how did they start? How did they penetrate through Nigerian or through African uh, belief system? Because we already had a laid down belief system, a laid down tradition
Yes.
before the
Yeah,
arrival of
follow-
the colonial
follow-
master.
follow-
They started with force one,
Ocean.
using what's it called? Religion.
Beautiful.
This and we had our own gods. They said these gods are not real gods, they are deities that should not be worshipped, they are evil. They symbolize um, everything bad. That there's only one true God, which they put that thought in our head, and we Africans we went
What about
along
that?
with it, and we started giving birth and started passing it down to the
Generation
next
after
generation, and
generation.
we are suffering from the influence of the Westerners now. Come to modern day situation. We are going to school to learn like under formal education, learning what exactly it how does it how does this how will I put it? How does it signify or bring out our Africanness? Because what are we being taught in school? English. The proper way to dress. What is the proper way to dress? It is the standard of white of the Westerners. They told you that for you, they gave us a standard, a criteria for aesthetic judgment. And you have to be white, first of all. You have to be a certain shape and size. But if you look at the African ladies, irrespective of color, we are beautiful, but we're not regarded as beautiful. Look at other let's look at religions per se. We have the Yoruba people's Congress, I think. They have their own religion, they have their own belief system. We have other Ifa, Afa, you come to the Igbo part, we have other gods, Chi, but they are regarded as by still Africans, they are regarded as deities, demigods that should not be worshipped. That there's only one true God, which is a foreign. So let me not use the word foreign God,
Imposed
which
one.
is yes.
Foreign
I'm a
imposed.
Christian. I believe that there is one God, but I'm talking from the perspective of traditional African belief system.
Okay.
Do you understand?
Okay.
Now you said something about music. I agree with the fact that for Africans to fight back for our identity, our consciousness, we should use
Look for something.
factors
Our
like
music is one
music
brain
and
resource.
but what you are putting out there is not what maybe you misinterpret it. You said music of Burna Boy, Davido, Wizkid, and the likes. What are they? Listen to the lyrics of that songs.
Ooh.
What are they? I understand the factor that is bringing Afro beats, Afro pop, everything
Yeah, I love
African.
that.
But you should understand the fact that music
The
in
lyrical
this
content.
context,
Is that what you're saying?
yes.
Lyrical content.
Mm.
Yeah, I know it's a case. You see, sometimes you need to go for the message, not the messenger. You see, I love the fact that it's Afrobeat. Now it's not left to you to decipher or sift out the contents, the negative one, take it out. But one thing is they are banding something which I like, Afrobeat, and that I go for. Later we'll start sifting them, and we go for the real thing, real with the shaft. So for now, let's appreciate it. The fact that we're appreciating it, I am happy about that. That's why I'm in support of them.
Okay.
Check out when flowers around, it's Africa, it's attire.
Yes,
But
I-
not boy sometimes, it's attire. I like that. I appreciate the way that we do. But there are negatives. It's not my business.
Okay.
You know.
Right. Thank you so much for the talk. Yeah, let me begin from the African consciousness. Yeah, like she has said earlier, that Africans have lost their identity, and up to now, we've been in search of our African identity.
Right.
Yeah, several years have passed. We are still in search
Session, yeah.
of African identity. And why are we still in search of African identity? It's because we haven't yet identified the major thing that led to the loss of identity. Despite the fact that we we um we are aware of what led to the loss of identity, but we are yet to truly identify that particular thing that led to the loss of identity. Yeah. We said that the Westerner, when the Westerner came into Africa, yeah, for one of the major weapons they use in, because the Westerner does not come and get everything you have, or just come and colonize Africa all of
Suddenly.
it suddenly. It's when it
So
is a gradual
yeah,
process.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. The first thing they did was to change the mentality
Yeah.
of Africans,
Yeah.
because Africans are we are so intelligent, we are rational. So they realize what is that thing, and how can they come in? Because you can't just tell Africans that, yeah, all these things you are doing, it is wrong, it is dirty, it is no, no, they won't, because Africans are so radical. So the best thing they could do was to change their mentality.
It's not about mind.
Yeah, change the mind, change the consciousness, change our thinking. So I think that is or the major reason for the loss of our identity. And now that every other factors has been attached to it, I believe the one of the best ways to get back the identity is consciousness emancipation, like psychological emancipation. Yeah, let me put it that way. Professor Azunabo, in one of his books, mentioned like the three in consciousness, I mean, psychology emancipation, cultural emancipation, and the last one, I think, religious emancipation or something like that. I can't remember the last one, but I want to pick on that psychological emancipation. We need to liberate ourselves from this Western thoughts. Nowadays, if you notice, there is nobody, no Nigerian, let me use Nigeria as an example. No Nigerian, if you tell any Nigerian now that between African products and Western products, which one would you prefer? If you are to talk to like 1 to 10 people, 9 of them will prefer the Western,
It's the foreign. Yeah,
the foreigner. So yeah, but because we believe whatever comes from outside, it's way better, because we believe that they are well developed, and we are still developing. So that mentality is still there, that ideology is still there. So I think we need to go back to start. This thing does not even begin from the school. Or I won't. I agree to your musical aspect, but I will also disagree to some points, because I believe it has to go back to the family system, because that is where the thing comes from, and that is and if you want it to go back to where we want it to go, it has to go back to where it comes from. So it has to go back from the family system. So how can a child be trained in an African way, thinking like an African? Yeah, knowing that yes, this is Africa. I am an African. Yeah, this man, beautiful Nubia.
Yeah, maybe okay.
Yeah, in one of his songs,
Artist.
yeah, he
I like the
mentioned
song
something
too.
that we should teach, because I listen to music
Yeah, I
very
like the
lot.
song. I like the song.
Yeah, he said we should. I think you know what I'm saying. He was saying that they say we are free, but and colonization is the thing of the past. But if you look around ourselves, we are still
Yeah,
colonized.
yeah,
So we need to
colonized,
start
definitely.
integrating our children. We need to start teaching ourselves from the family. Like it takes us back to the family background, not even in the school. So I think the best way to, I mean, the best place to start this the search for African identity, and where we can really get this from the family system.
I agree with you.
Yeah, from the family system. And looking at the way the world is now advanced, things are now being technology has now gotten like over the world and everything. But I think regardless, there are ways by which we can do things in a way that it won't affect our identity, and at the same time, we will also move with civilization.
Yeah, thank you so much. You see, um, I'm a single father. Sorry, I'm sorry, private. Whenever my son comes around for the holidays, if he stays with my parents, I often beg my parents, Allah Kidoma law, speak language you think. I mean, don't my mom from Benue. Speak this boy is language, you don't. You know what I'm saying? So language is a core aspect. If you want that retrieval, the radicalization of has to start with language is a core. You get me? Look at Japan. If you go to Japan, most of their phones and so it's written in their language. Germany the same thing. So it's only Africa where we don't have it. So language is a core area. And that's why I told you that I like what these guys are doing. Sometimes they're chipping Yoruba language from artists, which is good. So language is a core area of retrieving the self, grab the mind. You think in your language sometimes. But currently, some of us, especially the Gen Zs, cannot speak their language. And that's why I said, for some people, the highest form of intelligence is English. It's wrong. Look at the Chinese man, the Japanese. They are brilliant. They speak their language. So, my brother, I agree with you. Language is a core area where we need to retrieve the self in Africa. Thank you. Definitely. Thank you.
But you said something, and I would like you to clarify that. You said GMO foods are bad. I am a researcher, I'm a scientist, and I beg to differ. We have seen lots of genetically modified organisms being introduced in food, agriculture proceeds, and to a large extent, so far, of course, there are different researches that are still ongoing. There has not been one that has been directly linked to GMO to be causative organism or to be something that is detrimental to human health. Crop production, it has been of fantastic help, especially in agricultural industry. So I would need you to please clarify that as a scientist, that is actually saying we are not doing our work. And I know you don't mean that. She gets that. So please try to clarify that statement. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. You see, my grounds with the GMOs or those pushing for it is in trying to suppress the world with it, so as to replace the natural grown foods. And that's why I have a problem. I think we should allow both to compete and not foster this in on us. Because I see a conspiracy. Oh, because of robotics, there will be less human beings on the farm. Let's kill the farming industry and mass produce GMOs, which are kind of easier to produce, mass produce. I'm not happy with that. And that's why I try to discourage the issue of GMOs. We should really relax that on GMOs. We should allow natural foods to grow too. Look at what the Fulani killers are doing, killing our farmers. There's a conspiracy story out there that they're doing it. There are these companies that some GMO companies are doing that, sponsoring them to kill the farmers. So we rely on GMOs. Yeah, I don't know if you heard that story.
Has there
I've
been
heard it.
has there been specific link to that?
Well, it's a
Do you
conspiracy. It's
have
a
your
conspiracy.
facts and
Well,
figures?
It's a
well,
conspiracy.
this thing might not happen. It has not yet been proven.
Exactly.
So we cannot rely on
We
that.
cannot take
As a fact.
categorically.
Yeah.
Yes, you can disagree that you are not a part of GM. But I want you to understand that whether we like it or not, the world is evolving. The number of farmers on the farm cannot quantify the use of tractors. And I believe as we are evolving, as the world is evolving, technology advancement, then we should also move with that. GMO is fantastic. What is GMO? Genetically modified organisms. And before these things would have been introduced into the food, the plants, there are regulatory bodies, FDA, NAFDAC, these are international bodies that actually ensures that it is not detrimental and it has low risk factors. So please, sir, when you're saying that, no, you're attacking the
Scientists,
standard.
I am
No,
scared.
let me come in here. This is just, you mentioned this in the past. That's not the subject matter of this discussion.
I know.
So we will come to GMO proper
Okay,
as
okay.
a topic of discussion.
Okay, okay.
Now let me come back to the issue of the Africanization. You made that correction. It was a typo. Say the Africanization instead of the Africanization. Because our mind has already been de-Africanized, so we are re-Africanizing it. But what I want to ask you is that we are caught up in this process of decolonization. As we are trying to decolonize no religious, conceptual decolonization, and all those stuff, also we are also being recolonized in a bigger way. Look at AI today. All the AIs manufactured are with the bias ideology. That's what the ideology of the manufacturers. Also, Okoro is talking about African AI. That possibility of achieving that African AI, an AI that will be manufactured with African bias, of embodying African reality, African experience. So we're talking about bioethics has grown from economic bioethics, mainstream bioethics to global bioethics. And when you look at the concepts, they are see that they are all alien to our culture. So we're talking about African bioethics training and research. Now we can bring up our indigenous thought system to speak in global bioethical issues. So I will not just be there for consumer child. The issue of right to right to respect for autonomy is a product of individualistic society. The principle of respect for autonomy. That's why individualism comes in. When we talk about a fun concept also, in Africa there are certain things that happen. We don't need to really seek the concept of the person. And you do that in participatory identification with community values. And you find your identity from, through dependence on the cultural specifications. Because someone is growing up, a lady is growing up, they're hoping to get married. Now they say, no, I don't want to get married. But they don't want, marriage is not, we don't force our children to get married, but you are growing up saying that that is it. That is even why you find your identity. In that marriage, find your expression, find your the completion of your femininity. So there are certain things that happen. A widow making her reproductive available to the family that married her, despite the death of the husband, she wants to have a child. This is not under control. This is not under. She's not under undue influence as external, Westerners or example we look at it. But if you are from within, if you are from within that cultural setting, you understand that this through identification with community values, she finds her identity. So agreeing to continue to procreate, you are not now making yourself a community person instead of an individual that say no, let my reproductive apparatus die with me. I cannot procreate because my husband is gone. But you still procreate. You have identified with the community values. So that solidarity with community values is what gives you identity in a contemporary society. But it's not like that in a pluralistic society. So those are the differences. But we are still consumers of Western or alien thought system. So as we are trying to decolonize in the ones we are still being colonized mentally, conceptually, in other ways. One musician who said, only you can free your mind from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our
But
mind.
knowledge.
Yeah. So not but yourself can free your mind. So begin to look at the areas that your mind is. You are just estranged from your own culture. We are not saying that we're in a global war. We're living in a multicultural war. With all these many cultures will come to have a point. Not one trying to suppress
Yeah,
others.
exactly.
When we talk about bioethics, when you only taking concept, Western concept, it becomes bioethic imperialism. So we must also allow our voices to be heard. Then we come to that global plane where we get a standard operating procedure, then for ethical analysis. Not just say this is the way they do it in China, that is what the world subscribe to. Or the way they do it in America, the whole world will subscribe to that. You have to look at specificities from all the cultural expressions, what is common, you get a common ground that can be a standard operating procedure, ethical analysis. So when our bioethics will be sound and robust, when other cultures, other disciplines have their voice in politics, not imposing a particular worldview onto others. That's my contribution.
Thank you. Thank you. So that's all.